A haunted school? It's not as unusual as it sounds. I suspect it's no different than, say, a haunted hospital, other than the fact that fewer people have passed away at a school. Maybe a haunted shopping mall would be a better comparison. Why would anyone want to haunt a school, you ask? Well, schools such as Columbine have a history of terrible tragedy, so that would kind of be a given. My own pet theory, and that's all it is, a theory, that many people look back on their lives and realize, sadly in most cases, that their school days were the happiest of all. If you could come back as a ghost, wouldn't you be drawn to a place you loved and enjoyed? Conversely, maybe you were bullied and tormented in school, and choose to come back and take vengeance in the place where you were the most miserable. Either way, haunted schools do exist. Here's my experience with one I attended for 7 years. In the West Knox County community of Solway, there stands a building which was once known as Fairview Elementary School. It was built in the early part of the last century as part of the WPA program. I attended this school from the 1st through the 7th grades. The only reason I didn't attend 8th grade here was that during the summer between grades 7 and 8, the school dropped grades 6 through 8, and I was forced to go to the newly opened Carnes Middle School a few miles away. I knew right away, even as a child, that things were somewhat different at Fairview. I'd heard from older kids, even before I started 1st grade, that the school was haunted. As the local playground chatter and urban legends went, it was haunted by the ghost of at least one teacher and as many as 2 or 3 kids, at least one female and one male child. I had severe separation anxiety in the 1st grade. As long as my mom sat in the back of the room, she was a room mother, I was fine. But the minute she left, I became a screaming, crying mess. I'm sure part of this was my struggles with undiagnosed, at the time, Asperger's syndrome. I had certain little rituals that I simply had to perform at home before leaving for school. I would make sure they were completed and in the correct order, even if it made me late for school. I didn't care about being late. Being late was nothing. But let me forget one little part of my morning routine, then it was all about running back into the house and starting the process over, while my mother, God bless her, she had the patience of a saint, waited patiently in the running car, maybe honking the horn if I was really running over time. And then, in addition to my OCD and Asperger tendencies, the fact that the school was haunted didn't make things any easier. There were certain doors that opened with ease most of the time, but then would suddenly hold fast as if being blocked by the other side. This happened not only to me, but I observed it happening to other children as well. There were also disembodied voices of both adults and children. Voices audible to the point that the teacher would actually pause and look around the room, or even go out into the hallway of the grades 1 through 3 block, only to find the other teachers peering out their doors into the hallway as well, with no perpetrators in sight. Another frequent occurrence was the bell, the infamous bell. It signified the start and the end of the day, as well as lunch times and the odd fire drill on occasion. The bell was located in the central point of the school, in an area where 2 of the 3 major hallways intersected. Only the principal was allowed to ring the bell, and the chain that actuated the electronic switch was safely kept high enough that curious little hands couldn't reach it. If I remember correctly, the chain was also secured to an eye hook with a little padlock, to which the principal had the only key, which I remember the principal at the time, Mr. Slusher, kept on a little chain in the watch pocket of his vest. So, here was this bell, access to which was incredibly restricted, yet at odd times it would ring when no one was around it. It wasn't the normal ring, but rather a single ding that would peal throughout the school, instantly gaining the attention of all who heard it, which was everyone, being that this was a small suburban school out in the county. There was, during any given school year, about 200 kids in the entire place. Doors would fly open, teachers would stick their heads out of the rooms, and the principal would scurry down from the office, only to find no trace of anyone near the bell. Over the 7 years I was in attendance at Fairview, I observed numerous electricians, some from the county school system, others independent, check the bell's wiring to no avail. It was just something we learned to deal with, and everyone knew that the sound of a single ding meant simply continue as you were. One red-headed kid named Robbie speculated that the single bell was an omen and claimed that every time it happened, it meant he was going to get in trouble regarding some unrelated offense. We all nodded our heads in agreement at this idea on the playground, but I never saw any pertinent evidence to back up Robbie's claim. He had also claimed the same thing during another school year regarding the song of a whippoorwill that had nested in a tree just outside the classroom window. Another weird area of the school was in a narrow stairwell that led down to the school's dank, musty library in the darkened basement. At the last bit of segmented hallway before entering the library proper, which was actually just one room, there was a set of doors on either side. These wooden doors, about 3 feet square and set about 3 feet up the wall, were more fabled at Fairview than the wardrobe in C.S. Lewis' book. There were tales of children entering the oddly built sub-basement on either side of the hallway, never to be seen again. I know that on at least a couple of occasions, I myself cracked open one of the doors on a dare and saw what inexplicably looked like kids crawling around in the darkness. One kid I knew named Steve brought a small battery-operated flashlight to school one day. During an opportune moment when the librarians, who would chase you away from the wooden doors if they saw you messing about, were looking away, he switched the light on and tossed it in as far as he could. Several of us peered in and saw the light, but within a couple minutes, the dirt-walled hole was dark once more, as if the flashlight had actually been swallowed up by the blackness therein. Eventually, some kid hurt themselves falling headfirst out of the door back into the hallway. It was the same Robbie from before. I wonder if the bell rang a single time before he bashed his head. Had to be carted off in an ambulance, returning to school the next day with 7 stitches. Robbie always claimed that he was shoved from behind out of the hole. But then again, he was known for wild tales and causing trouble. He and his older brother, Bucky, once sat in the street in front of their house, delighting in seeing how many cars they could back up in each direction. Anyway, that ended not only the adventures into the doors, but the library itself. The doors were nailed and triple padlocked shut, and the library was closed. We started getting weekly visits from the county bookmobile. The ex-library in the basement was eventually turned into a music room, and the wooden doors in the walls were walled over with sheetrock, a fresh coat of paint, all but forgotten. Some of my best haunted experiences at Fairview, however, were after such time as I was a student there. I hope anyone hearing this will understand that this was a different time, a different era, and headlines pertaining to school violence were still decades away. But Fairview was rarely fully secured after hours. The only security system, as it were, was either Reuben or Moses, the 2 elderly janitors, and they were usually out of the school and home by 5 or 6 in the evening. It was easy, very, very easy, as it were, to pay Fairview a visit after hours. I know because, well, I paid the school such a visit on more than one occasion. Although my mom usually drove me to school where I could choose to ride the bus, I actually lived within walking distance of the school. 2 miles via the roads, or a little over a mile if I went straight through the woods as the crow flies. On this one particular evening, it was in the fall, just about the time school was due to be back in session, my best friend John and I walked from our area over to the school. We took the roads most of the way, but cut through the fields and farmland the last half mile or so to avoid detection. While the school didn't have many security measures per se, there were watchful eyes of neighbors that lived nearby. If we'd been spotted, the Solway grapevine, notorious for local gossip, as happens in any small community throughout the country and probably the world, would have sprang into action and the story would have passed from mouth to ear to mouth, and our mothers would have known what we'd been up to before we even made it back home. We made it to the school undetected, and we weren't really surprised to find the doors we could get to discreetly locked tight. The windows, however, were another story. The second or third one we tried slid open noiselessly. We clambered up and lowered ourselves stealthily inside a darkened classroom in the lower grade block on the back side of the school. The first order of business was to make sure we were truly alone. If we could slip in so easily, so could any number of people who might have decided to do so for whatever reason or reasons. We hunched silently behind a teacher's desk for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably all of 15 or 20 minutes. Other than the usual creaks and groans associated with a building from the 1930s with hardwood flooring, we were greeted with an eerie silence. This eerie silence I'm speaking of, it pervades the mind regarding places we usually consider very noisy. If you've ever been in a school or a church or even a shopping mall or amusement park, and you're the only one there, you know just how creepy the silence is of which I speak. It gives the place a reverence that it might not otherwise deserve. So here we were, skulking around in our old elementary school, eyes accustomed to the darkness. We kept low, going by the doors and windows, and kept a wary eye out for any telltale headlights in the parking lot, or sounds that one of the heavy wooden doors might make if it were being unlocked. We weren't here to do anything more than explore and bask in the thrill of being in this particular circumstance. We went from classroom to classroom, recalling time previously spent in each one, some bad, some good, but all youthful nostalgia now, even though John and I had only been out of the school 1 and 2 years respectively. The office was locked, so we didn't proceed any further in that regard. If it was locked inside the school building proper, we meant for it to remain that way. We even dared each other to go into the girls' room, which we did, penetrating that wonder of wonders that we barely understood at the time. I can remember marveling at the vending machines on the wall, and only having the slightest idea of what they were for, although John, having grown up with 3 older sisters, had a better idea than I about those strange coin-operated boxes bolted to the wall. Ah, youth, when so many things were a mystery. After the foray into the forbidden territory of the girls' bathroom, we decided to end our trip into the unknown by visiting the combination auditorium, gym, lunchroom down at the lower end of the campus. This would be our final destination that evening and give a convenient side door exit well hidden from any casually observing neighbor or random passerby. We walked down the 7 or so steps into the sunken area and as silently as possible opened one of the large wooden double doors that led into this cavernous space. While our eyes had become accustomed to the darkness in the hallways of the school, there was enough ambient light coming into the hallway windows from outside to allow us to see. The gym-lunchroom combination was a different story. There were wire mesh-covered windows set way up high near the ceiling as the sole natural light source. The moon was full, or almost full, at that time, and it could be seen shining brightly in those high windows and sending shafts of light across the gym at an angle. Thanks to the brightness of the moon, the other areas of the huge room were cast in inky darkness. We just stood inside the doors, gazing into the velvety black abyss, when we heard it. It started slowly at first, and then became faster. It was the unmistakable click-click, click-click, click-click of a pair of high-heeled women's shoes crossing the gym floor. As the pace quickened, the clicking grew louder, and there was no mistaking it was heading straight for us. However, the shaft of moonlight perfectly lit the area where the footsteps were coming from, and there was absolutely no one there. As the click-clicks became maddeningly, insanely close, whatever paralysis we suffered suddenly broke, and we dashed back through the wooden doors, up the stairs in a single bound, and out one of the front doors of the school in a dead run. I don't think we looked back until we were across the field that would lead us safely away from the area. We collapsed in the high grass, panting, drawing in deep whooping breaths of the chill night air. After catching our breath, we flopped over and just observed the school and surrounding area for a bit. Thankfully, we hadn't been spotted by any of the school's neighbors when fleeing. No lights came on in any part of the school either, further reinforcing the fact that we had just come face to face, almost, with one of the more prominent legends of Fairview School, the Phantom Teacher. The story of the phantom teacher had been told almost as long as the school had been there. Although my mom didn't remember hearing it in the 1930s when she attended, but the school was new then. By the time my older brother started first grade there in the early 50s, the tale was already in full swing. The legend was that a certain teacher had died in the school, mercifully after the children had left for the day, and her spirit remained trapped there. Other variations included her being killed in a car accident on the way home, or simply retiring and coming back to haunt the school in her afterlife. Other than the last scenario, because there were teachers that had retired and summarily passed away, I was unable to find any information about a teacher having died while still teaching, and the remaining bit of the legend makes the most sense in an Occam's razor sort of way. We're both sure of what we heard and didn't see. We made other forays into the school, most of which were later on after the campus had closed completely and had been vandalized and trashed by the locals who were less respectful than we had been. There were no paranormal events on those occasions. Perhaps the sad state of the school had forced the ghost to go elsewhere for another school to haunt. However, instead of being demolished completely, a tech company stepped up and bought the property and revamped it into the current Fairview Technology Center. Are there ghosts there now? Who knows? I suppose one could ask the scientists who work there if they've ever experienced anything strange. But by the very nature of being scientists, they may not believe in such things as haunted elementary schools. Please bear in mind, however, now this facility is a highly surveilled, very private property and should be respected as such. One never knows. The scientists might consider a lockdown and paranormal investigation as something fun to do.